Our next speaker is Dr. Ara Sanjian, who's an associate professor of history and the director of the Armenian Research Center at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. From 1996 to 2005, he was the chairman of the Department of Armenian Studies, History, and Political Science at Haigazian University in Beirut. His research interests focus on the post-World War I history of Armenia, Turkey, and the Arab states of Western Asia. He is the author of Turkey and Her Arab Neighbors, 1953-1958, a study in the origins and failure of the Baghdad Pact, as well as 2 monographs and a number of scholarly articles and book chapters published in English, Armenian, Russian, and French.
Ժողովրդական կուսակցությունը եւ ես շատ բադական կհանդիպինք 25 տարի առաջ իրենց մասին էր իմ առաջին հոդվածս որ գիտական հանդեսի մեջ լույս տեսավ եւ այդ էր պատճառը որ Ստեփան Աստուրյանն այս անգամ ձեւով հրահանգեց որ ցածրատ կուսակցության մասին խոսիմ եւ այս ամիսներում փորձեցի իմի փերել այս կուսակցության մասին դարբեր քիրքերու մեջ գրված նյութերը եւ աչքի անցել նաեւ իրենց մամուլը ձեւով ամփոփում է Մեդոլապանական հարցերում մասին ավելի գուզեմ բադաս եթե հարցերը լան գուզեմ պատասխանել հետո ներկայացելիքս այս ցանկրվանին բարձրապես համարոտ ընթացք կներ գուսակցության պատմության. The Armenian People's Party was arguably the second most significant political organization in Armenia in 1918 to 1920. However, historians have paid relatively little attention to it. This paper will present a brief summary of the party's history and ideology based on available secondary sources, as well as newspapers published by the party. It will show that the Populists constituted an integral part of the history of the independent Armenian Republic and were present at all its important junctures. The party was established in Tiflis in spring 1917. However, its prehistory goes decades back to the formation of an Armenian bourgeoisie in 19th century Transcaucasia. Its founders came primarily from the Armenian intellectual, professional, commercial, and industrialist classes in Tiflis. The newspaper Meshag was their mouthpiece. During the First Russian Revolution in 1905 to 1907, the Party of People's Freedom, also known as the Constitutional Democrats or Cadets, was established in Moscow. Many Armenians grouped around Meshag supported the Cadets. However, some also made a parallel attempt to set up a distinct Armenian party which would espouse the Cadet principles and goals, but would also fill a void among Armenians in Transcaucasia because the Russian Cadets paid little attention to purely Armenian concerns. The Tsarist authorities blocked this attempt. Another effort to form an Armenian liberal democratic party was already underway in Tiflis during the Great War when a new but successful revolution toppled the Tsar in February 1917. 2 weeks after his abdication, many of those behind the above-mentioned failed initiative met again in Tiflis and put forward the formation of what would eventually be the Armenian People's Party. The party's manifesto, published on April the 7th, provisionally adopted the Russian cadet program on issues related to state affairs and citizens' rights. It also promised to eventually have its own program concerning Armenian national and religious affairs. Finally, it presented its 22-member provisional central board, including one woman, Sofia Daniel Beck. The party's liberal objectives were consolidated through its program approved at its first Congress in Tiflis in September 1917. The Populists were an Armenian party with no links to the Russian Cadets, even though they were influenced by the Cadets. They denied being a bourgeois party and regularly proclaimed their so-called classless character. They confirmed the basic points of the cadet program, including their plan for land reform. However, they would act everywhere where Armenians lived, and any Armenian, even if he or she was not a Russian citizen, could become a member. They also emphasized the right of all nationalities in Russia to receive education in their mother language. At this Congress, the party claimed to have already established 32 branches and 10 sub-branches during its first 5 months. Because of its bourgeois character, it had more followers in Tiflis and Baku than in Yerevan and the Armenian agrarian provinces in Transcaucasia. Its new 23-member Central Committee, which included 2 women, was located in Tiflis. In November-December of 1917, the People's Party merged with the like-minded National Democratic Party in Baku, which had itself been established only a few months earlier. As the price of this merger, the People's Party promised never to use the word cadet again as a label. The naissance of this party was a byproduct of the February Revolution in Russia. Its founders pledged support to the provisional government in Petrograd, as well as to the Special Transcaucasian Committee, the OZACOM, which the provisional government had just established to manage affairs in the area. Indeed, one of the populist leaders, Mikhail Papajanian, was the only Armenian among the 5 members of OZACOM responsible for agriculture and waterworks. Papajanian, a wealthy man, had earlier been an active cadet and a former member of the Russian State Duma. At this early stage, the populists preferred to wait for the projected all-Russian Constituent Assembly to solve the empire's major problems. They also backed the continuation of Russia's war effort against the Ottomans and their allies until its victorious end. They did not commit themselves to any position regarding the future of Western Armenia. However, they supported Russia's territorial integrity and advocated administrative territorial autonomy for Armenians and other nationalities in Transcaucasia. The boundaries of these autonomous areas should be determined along ethnic lines, and they should have their legislative bodies to decide on local issues. The cultural freedoms of all minorities should be guaranteed within each area, same for Armenians living in other parts of Russia. They also called for the restoration of the full autonomy of the Armenian Church within Russia. The established record of many populist leaders within the Armenian community in Tiflis helped the new party quickly become an important actor on the Armenian scene in Transcaucasia. At the first Russian-Armenian Congress in Tiflis in September to October 1917, there were over 40 populists among the 200 or so delegates. They constituted the second largest faction behind the Tashnags and were larger than both the Social Democratic and Socialist Revolutionary factions. This Congress elected a 15-member Armenian National Council, which assumed executive functions. It consisted of 6 Tashnags, 2 populists, 2 Social Democrats, 2 Socialist Revolutionaries, and 3 non-partisans. The populists also took part actively in the elections to the city Dumas held in Transcaucasia in October 1917. Among the 780 delegates elected in various Armenian inhabited cities in the area, there were 32 populists, compared to 231 Tashnags. The populists condemned the Bolshevik takeover in Petrograd on October the 25th, 1917. Thereafter, they would remain unswerving opponents of Bolshevism until it became impossible for the People's Party to function openly following the Sovietization of Transcaucasia in 1920-1921. Subsequent to the Bolshevik capture of power, the OZACOM was replaced by the Transcaucasian Commissariat. This new body had 3 Armenian members, 2 Tashnags and 1 Menshevik. Of the 5 members of the outgoing OZACOM, only the populist Papajanian did not receive a portfolio in the new commissariat. During the election to the Constituent Assembly in Russia in November 1917, the Tashnags received 558,400 votes, or 22.7% of the total votes cast in Transcaucasia, coming third of the Mensheviks and the Musavat Federalists. The Armenian People's Party received only 15,180 votes, well below the 65,000 vote threshold to send a delegate to the assembly. Despite reservations among leading political parties in Transcaucasia towards the Bolsheviks, the Commissariat went along with the latter and agreed to a separate armistice with the Ottomans on December the 5th, 1917, bypassing Russia's British and French wartime allies. The populists opposed this separate armistice, arguing that it would be detrimental to Armenians. They contended that the Bolshevik motto of self-determination would only benefit Kurds and Turks living in Western Armenia. Moreover, Mshag editor and populist leader Hampartsu Marakelian rightly predicted that following the Russian withdrawal from the front, the Ottomans might attack Transcaucasia. The populists claimed that the Tashnak endorsement of a separate armistice was the party's second major error after its involvement in the formation of the Armenian Volunteer Corps at the beginning of the war. In January 1918, the Constituent Assembly was dispersed by the Bolsheviks. A few days later, the Ottomans crossed the armistice line and advanced eastward. This move also coincided with the outbreak of Armenian-Muslim inter-ethnic clashes within Transcaucasia. Papajanian was again called to play an important role to find a way out of these challenges. He was included in the International Military Council and also joined the delegation which attempted to restore inter-ethnic peace in the Elizavetpol province, that is the Ganzak or the Ganja province, in February 1918. When the Transcaucasian Legislative Assembly, the Sejm, proclaimed the region's independence from Russia in April 1918, the populist representatives in the Armenian National Council, Arakelian and Samson Harutyunyan, approved this decision only with some reservations. In the meantime, another populist, Kevork Melik Karagözyan, was among the 3 delegates dispatched by the Armenian National Council to Berlin, this time to seek German assistance against the Ottoman onslaught. Finally, on May the 26th, after the declaration of Georgia's independence and the beginning of the quick disintegration of the Sejm, the populist and social democratic members of the Armenian National Council were the first to call for Armenia's independence, insisting that no alternative existed. Papajanian was among the delegates dispatched to Batumi on May the 28th to negotiate peace with the Ottomans on behalf of the Armenian people. Populists in the Armenian National Council voted against the candidacy of the Tashnak candidate Hovhannes Kachaznuni to head the first cabinet of the independent republic. Instead, they proposed the name of Papajanian. Kachaznuni was ultimately selected as prime minister, but failed to form a cabinet until the end of June, for about 3 weeks. The Tashnak reportedly valued populist collaboration more than that of the socialist revolutionaries or social democrats. They, that is the Tashnaks, believed that the financial, economic, commercial, and administrative acumen of the Armenian bourgeoisie was indispensable for the welfare of the new republic. However, the populists now refused to serve on a cabinet headed by a Tashnak. They blamed the Tashnaks for the tragic state of Armenian affairs and called on them to voluntarily leave the political arena and make room for new, untainted leaders to build the new republic. In the meantime, the Social Democrats and Socialist Revolutionaries refused to participate in a populist-dominated cabinet because they identified the populists as bourgeois. Nevertheless, even after the formation of a Tashnak majority cabinet led by Kachazduni, the Armenian National Council dispatched Babajanian, together with the Tashnaks Avedis Aharon and Alexander Khadisyan, to Constantinople to continue negotiations with the Ottomans, particularly on drawing Armenia's boundaries with Georgia and Azerbaijan. This delegation returned to Yerevan only after the Ottoman acknowledgement of defeat on October the 30th with the signing of the Mudros Armistice. However, it has been noted that Papajanian was often absent from Constantinople and participated but little in the mission's activities. Moreover, when the flag of independent Armenia was designed in Yerevan in late July, it was the populist, Stepanos Malkhasyan, who came up with the eventually approved proposal to have it in red, blue, and orange. A few days later, on July the 28th, Petrosyan, a populist supporter, belatedly joined Kachazduni's cabinet as Minister of Justice, but not as a party representative. In the new republic's appointed legislature, the Council of Armenia, the populists received 6 seats out of 47. Krikor Der Khachadarian became one of the council's 2 vice presidents. The populists were also represented in all parliamentary committees, and the populist deputies initially supported Kachazduni's closures platform, which showed no indication of the Tashnak's socialism. 2 weeks later, on August the 14th, 1918, the populists started issuing a newspaper in Yerevan. Zhogovurt, the newspaper, was destined to be the longest surviving newspaper in the Republic, publishing just over 400 issues until Armenia's Sovietization in December 1920. The party also steadily established new branches in various localities in Armenia. Finally, a significant pointer of its growing enthusiasm toward independent Armenia was the fact that when Zhogovurt reprinted in late September the party's program adopted a year earlier, under very different circumstances, it now added the note that all references to Russia in the text of the program should now be read as Armenia. In October 1918, as it became evident that the Ottomans were losing the war, the People's Party negotiated an agreement with the Tashnaks to form a new coalition government, which saw the light on November the 4th. The Tashnaks believed that the People's Party, as representatives of the Armenian bourgeoisie, had numerous specialized cadres who could work in the government. Moreover, the populist liberal and constitutional principles would appeal to the victorious allies and the diasporan communities. Therefore, Khachazaduni promised the populists a gradualist approach in social and agrarian reform. The Tashnaks retained control of the premiership and the ministries of foreign affairs and internal affairs in the new cabinet. The populists received the portfolios of justice, the economy, education, and provisions, Barenavorum. In addition, the Council of Armenia elected the populist Minas Berberian as state controller. Nevertheless, the party's central committee remained for the time being in Tiflis. Simon Varatsian, a Dashnak leader and historian of the Republic, asserts that the populist ministers and the state controller enthusiastically embarked upon developing Armenia into a true republic. However, their initial enthusiasm, according to Varatsian, soon faded into distress, reportedly because of the difficult life conditions in Yerevan. More than one populist minister departed for Tiflis for prolonged periods. For two ministers, the departure was permanent. In the end, following the death of two Tashnak ministers, Aram Manogyan and the other one assassinated, Khachazaduni reconstructed his government, and Christopher Verbishian replaced the absent Levon Hulian as the populist minister of provisions. A state controller, Minas Berberian, also died because of the pandemic that cost thousands of lives in Armenia that winter. Nevertheless, the populist ministers could still look back to some very serious achievements during their short term in office. Primarily, the efforts of Melik Karagözyan towards setting up a state university in Yerevan have to be noted. Basically, he was the Minister of Education, which prepared all the paperwork for the establishment of the university. Meanwhile, after forging of the coalition cabinet, the new Tashnak populist majority in the council often ignored the socialist opposition. However, one important issue over which the coalition partners diverged was the vote on December the 6th to adopt in Armenia the corpus of Russian imperial laws with all amendments introduced by the provisional government in 1917, plus all subsequent laws passed by the Transcaucasian Commissariat and the Sejm. The populists opposed this law because they disapproved of some of the socialistic legislation passed after the Russian Revolution of February 1917. In external relations, the delegation led by Avedis Aharonyan to participate in the Paris Peace Conference again included Babajanyan as a member. During his sojourn in France, however, Babajanyan would gradually distance himself from Aharonyan's delegation and start collaborating with the rival Armenian national delegation of Pogos Nubar. However, two other populists, Harutyun Piralyan, an expert in statistics and economics, and former finance minister Ardashes Enfiadjian, would in turn join Aharonyan's team as advisors in 1919. Both had earlier been members of Khachazaduni's mission to seek economic assistance for Armenia in Europe and the United States. As early as December the 8th, 1918, and that's only 2 or 3 days after the Ottoman troops leave Alexandropol, the populist leader Ervant Harutyunyan, who was more like a publicist, advocated the concept of united and independent Armenia in an article published in Zhogovurt. In April of 1919, after the Western Armenian Congress had adopted this concept, Hovannes Stepanyan, another populist, told the Populist Party meeting that this concept of united and independent Armenia had now superseded and made obsolete those parts of the party's 1917 program which dealt with Eastern and Western Armenia separately. Mary Karagözyan, as minister, presided over the May the 28th, 1919 celebrations to mark the first anniversary of the Proclamation of Independence. Acting Prime Minister Khatisyan read the Act of United Armenia, which the coalition cabinet had adopted 2 days earlier. The populist ministers in Yerevan had apparently endorsed this act without the consent of the party's central committee in Tiflis. Since the act had included passages that either ignored or contradicted the views of Boğaz Nubar, the populist Tiflis leadership rejected the right of the coalition cabinet to issue such a declaration. Thereafter, the populist, socialist revolutionary, and social democratic factions walked out of the Council of Armenia on June the 4th, and the legislature dissolved itself the next day. The People's Party also called its members from the coalition cabinet, and by then the campaign for parliamentary elections was getting underway, but the populists also withdrew their parliamentary slate consisting of 65 candidates and announced a boycott. Nevertheless, the populists continued to assert their dedication to Armenian independence and unity. In June 1919, the party's headquarters was moved to Yerevan, and Zhoghovurt became the party's central organ instead of Zhoghovurt published in Tiflis. The party also convened its second Congress in Yerevan in September 1919. The first had taken place 2 years earlier in Tiflis. The second Congress expressed deep admiration for the Western allies. It criticized the Dashnak government and summoned all liberal anti-socialist elements to jointly oust it from office. The party also announced that it would participate in every forthcoming regional and municipal election so as to place more members and sympathizers in administrative positions. Indeed, even after the boycott of national elections, the party remained represented in the local councils and continued to contest local elections. The Congress also approved a new program, the second in the party's short history. It called for the establishment of a united and independent Armenia with an outlet to the sea, thus predating by a few days the Tashnak party, who would also support the same demand during their respective party congress, which occurred later that month. Significant changes were also made in the program in the section dealing with agrarian reform. On the other hand, even after the populist boycott of parliamentary elections, Prime Minister Khatisyan continued to hope to reach an agreement with Boğaz Nubar and have the populists back in his cabinet. To leave the doors open, he confined his new cabinet, appointed on August the 10th, to only 6 members, with most ministers holding 2 portfolios. Indeed, emissaries from Boğaz Nubar's national delegation arrived in Yerevan in October, and Samson Harutyunyan joined them to negotiate along them. Talks were inconclusive, but in December, Khatisyan again wrote to Boğaz Nubar, expressing hope that the few remaining differences could still be reconciled. Finally, as the Allies extended de facto recognition to Armenia early in 1920, Boğaz Nubar asked populists Harutyunyan and Arshaluis Mkhitaryan in March to go to Yerevan and conclude on behalf of the national delegation an agreement based on the terms outlined in Khatisyan's letter. However, by then the Western interest in sponsoring a united Armenia was waning, and the Tashnaks were less enthusiastic to reach a deal. The next month, 4 new Tashnak ministers entered Khatisyan's cabinet, filling the portfolios that had been kept vacant since August 1919. Nevertheless, at the outbreak of the Communist Rebellion in May 1920, the populists joined the Ramgavars, social democratic specifists, and non-partisans in support of the Armenian government. They would even claim later that they had rendered practical assistance to the government to suppress the rebellion. After the subduing of the communist rebels, the populists participated enthusiastically in the second anniversary celebrations of the Republic on May the 28th, 1920. In June, they pledged support to the independence loan, the government's campaign to raise $20 million American dollars. And Fialjan accepted the chairmanship of the independent loan in France, Belgium, and Switzerland. Of course, he was in Paris with Aharonyan at the time. During the second half of 1920, the populists continued to oppose Soviet-Russian policies towards Armenia and the Kemalists. After the Kemalist invasion of Armenia in September, they again joined the Tashnaks, Ramgavars, and Chagyans, Socialist Revolutionaries, and the Social Democratic Labour Party to form an inter-party council to help the government in its resistance to the Kemalist-Bolshevik alliance. In the second half of November 1920, Kachazuni was asked to make an attempt to forge a coalition government, but he ultimately failed. Among the options which did not garner sufficient support was the populist demand to have enough portfolios in the projected coalition cabinet to balance those of the socialist parties. Garo Sasuni says that immediately after Armenia's Sovietization, populists were also among those arrested by the Bolsheviks. However, we were unable to identify names of specific individuals who suffered such a fate. It is also oft repeated that the populists supported the February rebellion against the Bolsheviks in 1921. While this is plausible, we should add that the People's Party did not join the Fatherland Salvation Committee. The only piece of hard evidence I have come across is the participation of populists in an inter-party meeting on the 25th of February when inter-party council was established. The populist Konstantin Gulnazarian was reportedly elected as its vice chairman. The open activities of the People's Party ceased out the Sovietization of Transcaucasia. A few populist leaders went into exile, while most others stayed in Soviet Armenia or Georgia and abandoned political aspirations. In the meantime, the party had managed in 1917 to 1921 to establish over 50 branches in Transcaucasia, the North Caucasus, and Central Asia. It had a presence in Karabakh. It also had representatives among the Armenian deputies serving in the Georgian and Azerbaijani parliaments. In addition to Zhogovurt, the populists also published the newspapers Norgyank in Alexandropol, Zhogovertitsain in Tiflis, Yergir in Baku, and Zhogovertagantert in Ashgabat. Throughout the period 1917 to 1920, the populists conducted negotiations with representatives of the Ramgavar party to forge a union of the two parties. However, this union became possible only in the nascent Armenian diaspora out of the Sovietization of Armenia, when individual members of the now practically disbanded People's Party living in exile joined Ramgavars and reconstituted Chagyans to establish the Democratic Liberal Party in 1921. The communists in Soviet Armenia paid very little attention to the Populist Party. Throughout those 70 years, only a single dissertation was written about the party by David Khechumian in 1987, and it remains unpublished. I am told even the manuscript cannot be found today. In the diaspora as well, there was very little attention paid to them by the Ramgavars themselves. We can talk about that later. And during the age of perestroika, that is late 1980s, Garen Simonian, then the president of the State Publishing Company in Armenia, Committee in Armenia, attempted to revive the newspaper Zhogovurt in November 1990, but this endeavor was discontinued after the release of a few issues. There is a party called Populist in Armenia today, but it has no connection at all, basically, with it. It is now called the Populist Party of Armenia, rather than the Armenian Populist Party. But essentially, the legacy belongs to the Ramgavar way of looking at Armenian life and history. Thank you very much.
Հարցը սովորված է պարոն Սանջյանին։ Պարոն Սանջյան, դուք գործածեցիք մի քանի անգամ Dashnax government արտահայտությունը։ Dashnax government, դաշնակցական կառավարություն։
Այո։
Նկատի ունեք 20 թվականի մայիսի 5-ից մինչև նոյեմբերի 23 բյուրո կառավարության շրջանը, թե առասարակ կարծում եք, որ Հայաստանի Հանրապետության կառավարության արտահայտության փոխարեն կարելի է այդպես գործածել։
Հայաստանի բոլոր կառավարությունները, բացի կոալիցիոն կառավարությունները, տաշնության կառավարություններ են։ Եթե կոալիցիոն կառավարության ժամանակաշրջանը դուրս հանենք, նույնն է ինչպես այսօր օգտագործենք հանրապետական կառավարություն կամ Ամերիկայի մեջ հանրապետական վարչագահ, ադիգա է։ Ուրիշ բան չի։
Չէ, ուզում եմ ասել, որ այսինքն ավելի ճիշտ չէ Հայաստանի Հանրապետության կառավարություն գործածենք, որտեղ գիտեք մեղադրանք գոյություն ունի, որ դաշնակցությունը սեփականում է այս հանրապետության պատմությունը եւ այդ իմաստով երբ որ մենք ասում ենք դաշնակցական կառավարություն, կարծես խորհրդային ժամանակների տերմինն ենք օգտագործում։ Չեք կարծում ավելի ճիշտ է, ավելի զգուշավոր լինենք։ Որտեղ Հայաստանի Հանրապետություն։
Ձեր մտահոգությունները շատ հասկանալի են, որովհետեւ որովհետև Հայաստանի մեջ երկարաժամանակ այդպես կործածված է, եւ իդեպս եմ բարոն Մելքոնյան, նույնիսկ հագաթեմնիական 800-յակի մեջ այդ խնդրեմը կա։ Հայաստանի բարակային երբեք չի կործածվի թաշնակցական Հայաստան եւ դա իգա ճիշտ է, բայց կկործածվի որ մենշևիկյան Վրաստան եւ մուսավատական Ադրբեջան բարերը, որոնք նույնպես սխալ պիտի ըլլան, քանի որ անոնք եւս սա խմբակրական սխալ է, վստահ եմ որ հավաքապարերու ժողովրդի կշտկվի։ Երկրորդ բարակային բայց երբ որ մենք ներգուսակցական միջգուսակցական բայկարի մասին կխոսենք որ այդ սովետական գաղաբարը պետք չէ մեզի գաշկան թե ովևէ ցեվով գուսակցությունը գոչելու իր ղեկավար գուսակցության անունով Հայաստանը 10 տարի ուներ հանրապետական կառավարություն, չէ՞։ Ադիգա ովևէ ցեվով չի նշանակել որ ամբողջ Հայաստանը հանրապետական գուսակցությունն էր։ Նույն ցեվով այս մտահոգությունը շատ լավ հասկանալի է խորհրդային ժամանակաշրջանի մեջ մեծած անհատներու բարակային այդ իմաստով իհարկե սխալ է կործածել այդ անունը, բայց երբ որ գսենք թե հանրապետական 1919 թվականին ուրեմն ժողովրդական գուսակցությունը գսե պետք է վար առնենք թաշնակցական կառավարությունը, այդ բարակային կառավարության գազը փոխելու մասին է եւ ուրիշ ովևէ բանի խնդիր չէ։ Բայց այդ բարակային այդ գարելի է, բայց այդ բարակային կառավարությունները բազմագուսակցական համագարկի մեջ որ դարբեր գուսակցական քույն ունին, անոնք ինչպես պիտի դարբերակել։ Այո, երբ որ բյուրո կառավարություն է։ Այո։ Ես կոալիցիոն կառավարություն բարը միշտ գործեցի, երբ որ խորսը կոալիցիոն կառավարության մասին նոյեմբերին մինչև հունիս 1918-19